It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind that made suburban life feel like a dream. Birds chirped over neatly trimmed lawns, sunlight glinted off wind chimes, and somewhere down the street, someone was already firing up a grill. I was sitting on my back porch, sipping lukewarm coffee and feeling, for the first time in a long while, like I had a grip on life. No deadlines, no drama, just the hum of sprinklers and the occasional bark from a neighbor's dog. My yard was my sanctuary, a patch of peace I'd earned through years of working long hours and keeping to myself. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud. I just liked things simple. A couple lawn chairs, a bird feeder, and my worn-out hammock swaying gently under the old maple tree. At least that was how it used to be, before the storm hit. Not a weather storm, no. This one wore oversized sunglasses, carried a clipboard like it was a sword, and spoke in legalese laced with judgment. Her name was Karen, and she was everything you imagine when you hear the term HOA president. For months I kept my head down, playing nice. I smiled at her forced greetings, nodded during her passive-aggressive lectures about trash bin placement, and even repainted my fence a slightly duller shade of beige just to keep the peace. But peace, I'd soon learn, wasn't part of her agenda. And it was only a matter of time before Karen decided that I, along with my perfectly average yard, had become a threat to her little empire. Karen wasn't just part of the HOA, she was the HOA. At least, that's how she carried herself, like a monarch ruling over a suburban kingdom from behind her hydrangeas and wrought iron garden signs. Her house sat 2 doors down from mine, pristine and eerily symmetrical, with a porch that looked like it had been curated by a lifestyle magazine. Every holiday brought an explosion of themed decorations, always perfectly timed and obsessively color-coordinated. But beneath the seasonal cheer was a woman who saw herself as the last line of defense between order and chaos. And unfortunately, chaos was anyone who didn't live exactly the way she thought they should. Her reputation preceded her. New neighbors got a welcome basket, sure, but it came with a printed pamphlet titled Guidelines for a Harmonious Community. She enforced rules that most people didn't even know existed. How tall your grass could grow, how many inches your garbage bins could be from the curb, how long a guest's car could be parked on the street before it became an eyesore. She once left a note on someone's mailbox because their dog barked too cheerfully. I tried to stay out of her crosshairs, but Karen had a sixth sense for spotting non-compliance. It started small, a sticky note about the color of my wind chimes not matching my shutters. Then a passive-aggressive smile when I put solar lights along my walkway. Apparently, they weren't in the approved list of fixtures. She'd say things like, just trying to keep the neighborhood looking its best, with a tone that made it clear she didn't include me in that vision. Still, I kept my cool. I'd seen her chew out a retired veteran for painting his shed without prior approval and glare at a family's 4th of July barbecue like it was an act of domestic terrorism. Most neighbors avoided her, but I somehow became her project. I wasn't flashy, but I wasn't part of her mold either. Maybe it was my backyard fire pit, or the occasional laughter from friends over beers. Whatever it was, she decided I was a problem. And once Karen made up her mind, she didn't just enforce rules, she made new ones just to trap you. It all came to a head on a warm spring afternoon, the kind where you want to kick off your shoes and feel the grass between your toes. I had invited a few friends over for a casual backyard hangout. Nothing wild, just burgers on the grill, a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock at a reasonable volume, and a few lawn games. There were no fireworks, no loud shouting, no drunk uncles jumping into pools. Just laughter, conversation, and the occasional clink of a glass. Kids tossed a football around. A couple of our dogs played chase. And for a few precious hours, life felt normal and free. Until Karen arrived. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She marched around the side of my house like a sheriff storming into a saloon. Her signature visor was on, her clipboard in hand, and a scowl that could sour milk. She didn't even greet me. She stood at the edge of my lawn like she was surveying a crime scene. "This gathering," she declared, "is in direct violation of HOA Article 4, Section 12. Unapproved use of outdoor space for public events." I blinked at her, thinking surely she was joking, but Karen had never once shown a sense of humor. I tried to explain that it was just a few friends, not an event. We weren't selling tickets or setting up tents, but she wasn't having it. "Multiple vehicles are parked along the street. Music is playing. There is open flame," she said, pointing at the grill like it was some kind of war crime. "And there are children, unsupervised children running amok." I looked at the kids who were laughing while trying to balance a soccer ball on a garden gnome's head. It was hardly Lord of the Flies. I asked her calmly to leave and promised that everything would be cleaned up by sunset. That should have been the end of it, but Karen doubled down. She snapped photos of my yard, my guests, even my grill. She told one of my friends to move his car before she had it towed. When he laughed, she whipped out her phone and started dialing what I can only assume was the HOA's emergency hotline. Then she turned to me and said the words that lit the fuse. "If you can't follow the rules like the rest of us, maybe you don't belong in this neighborhood." She didn't yell it. She said it in that quiet, cutting tone that makes your stomach turn. The laughter around me died down. People glanced awkwardly at the confrontation. I smiled politely, said nothing, and watched her storm off, muttering about citations and hearings. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about rules. This was about control. And if Karen wanted a showdown in suburbia, she was going to get one. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday evening in the community clubhouse, a place that usually hosted birthday parties and book clubs. But that night, it was transformed into Karen's courtroom. The folding chairs were arranged in perfect rows. A makeshift podium had been dragged to the front, and a long folding table was set up for the board, which was really just Karen and her two favorite rule-enforcing minions, Doug, who once reported someone for wind chimes being too loud, and Barbara, who had a laminated copy of the HOA charter in her purse at all times. I walked into a room full of curious neighbors. Some looked uncomfortable, others eager for the drama. Karen sat center stage in her HOA regalia, a blazer, a pearl necklace, and her ever-present clipboard. She greeted me with a smug, closed-lip smile, the kind that says, "I've already won." I took a seat near the front, aware that I was the main attraction for the evening. The meeting began with Karen reading a prepared statement about recent violations of community standards. She spoke like a prosecutor on a TV legal drama, referencing bylaws with surgical precision, quoting obscure sections about noise levels, guest limitations, and fire hazards. Photos of my grill, my friends' cars, and even a child's bubble wand were passed around like pieces of damning evidence. She paused for emphasis, raising her eyebrows at each so-called infraction. I stood up when invited to respond, and kept my voice calm. I explained that it was a small gathering, nothing destructive or disruptive. I pointed out that no neighbors had complained, and in fact several had attended and enjoyed themselves. I mentioned that there had been no noise after dark, no litter, and no violations of actual laws, just Karen's personal discomfort, dressed up in bureaucratic language. But reason didn't matter here. This was a performance, and the audience was stacked. Barbara clutched her charter like a lifeline, nodding along with Karen. Doug asked if I had obtained a community usage permit for the backyard fire pit. I blinked. A permit to grill burgers? Then something unexpected happened. One of my neighbors, Tom, quiet, keeps to himself, stood up. He said he was at the gathering, that his kids had a great time, and he didn't hear anything excessive. He said it was the first time in months he'd felt like this place had a sense of community again. Before he could finish, Karen interrupted and declared him out of order. She then motioned to the board for a vote. The verdict? A formal warning, a $200 fine for unauthorized gathering, and a requirement to submit a written apology to the board. I declined the last part. I walked out of that room not humiliated, but focused. Karen wanted to play power games. Fine. But I knew something she didn't. I had an ace up my sleeve, and it wore spandex. That night, after the hearing, I sat in my backyard staring at the string lights overhead, replaying every smug expression Karen had worn like a crown. The fine wasn't the issue, it was the principle. I could have paid it, moved on, maybe even gone full passive-aggressive with lawn decorations shaped like legal clauses. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't satisfy me. I didn't want to get even with a snide remark or some mild protest. I wanted to dismantle the imaginary throne she sat on, not with malice, but with flair. And then, like divine inspiration wrapped in elbow pads, it hit me. My cousin Max used to manage a small-time pro wrestling troupe, not WWE level, but a scrappy, theatrically gifted group of guys and gals who took local arenas by storm and treated every match like Shakespeare with body slams. They weren't just athletes, they were characters. Loud, ridiculous, larger-than-life personas who thrived on spectacle. I remembered watching one of their shows years ago, a backyard exhibition where someone dressed as a luchador tossed a guy named the Bureaucrat through a folding table. It was chaos. It was beautiful. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, and found Max. We hadn't talked in a while, but when I told him what happened, he laughed for 5 minutes straight. "You're telling me this HOA lady tried to publicly shame you over a cookout," he said. "Man, say less. We're in." We planned it for the following Saturday. Not a fight, not a show, just a little help with my yard work. They'd arrive in costume, over the top, pretending they were prepping for a wrestling event right in my backyard. Everything would be legal. No property violations, no noise after hours. Just pure, absurd theatre within the boundaries of the HOA code Karen worshipped. I didn't tell my neighbours. I didn't announce anything. I just spent the week mowing the lawn, tidying up, and adding a few harmless touches. A kiddie pool, a foam mat, a sign that read, "Welcome to the ring." It was all perfectly legal, wonderfully petty, and just the kind of ridiculous that Karen couldn't ignore. The stage was set. Slam Saturday was coming. Saturday arrived like a storm dressed in neon spandex. The sun was already high when the first car pulled up, an old van wrapped in decals of flame decals and lightning bolts, with the words Wrestleverse Elite painted across the side. The side door slid open, and out stepped a mountain of a man in a leopard print leotard and golden boots. Behind him came a woman in silver armor with face paint like a warrior goddess. Then a guy in a business suit carrying a folding chair who winked at me and said, "Name's the tax man. I've come to audit the lawn." I almost choked on my coffee. Within minutes, more wrestlers arrived, each more absurd than the last. There was Captain Elbow, who insisted on saluting every tree, and Dumpster Dave, who walked around with a plastic trash bin on his head yelling motivational slogans. They came equipped with rubber mats, foam dumbbells, and a giant inflatable bell they called the Ring of Justice. No actual fighting, no dangerous stunts, just exaggerated warm-ups, mock strategy sessions, and frequent declarations of Saturday Slam protocol. By 10 a.m., my yard looked like a rejected WrestleMania rehearsal. Curious neighbors peeked through blinds. Some came out with lawn chairs. A few kids ventured over, wide-eyed, when the Sledge Sisters began demonstrating how to do elbow drops onto beanbag chairs. Someone brought lemonade. Someone else brought popcorn. It turned into an impromptu block party, but one choreographed by fever dreams and body glitter. And then, like the villain entering a late-act scene, Karen appeared. She came marching down the sidewalk like she'd heard a fire alarm, hair pulled back tight enough to raise eyebrows. She stopped at the edge of my lawn, jaw tight, eyes scanning the chaos. "What is happening here?" she barked, clipboard clutched to her chest like a crucifix. The taxman stepped forward, bowed dramatically, and said, "We're engaging in a public display of neighborhood harmony through interpretive physicality." Karen blinked, visibly calculating her outrage. "You can't have a performance without a permit," she snapped. "No performance," I replied, walking up beside her. "Just a few friends helping me with my yard. No amplified music, no sales, no signage in violation, all within HOA regulations." She glanced at the mats, the crowd, the inflatable bell, the man in a cape doing lunges beside my bird feeder. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "I will be reporting this," she hissed, spinning on her heel. But her voice was drowned out by cheers when Captain Elbow pretended to pin a watermelon to the ground and declare victory over the seed of tyranny. It was absurd, it was theatrical, and it was entirely legal. My plan had worked. I wasn't just throwing a petty jab, I was body-slamming tyranny with joy. And the crowd? They loved every minute of it. By noon, the entire street felt like it had slipped into a parallel universe, where neighborhood bylaws bowed to elbow drops and exaggerated entrances. Kids were now handing out homemade Slam Saturday badges drawn in crayon, and one of the neighbors had fired up their grill to join in. The energy was electric, the laughter loud, and for once this place didn't feel like a row of cold, quiet boxes. It felt like a community. That was when Karen returned, and this time she wasn't alone. She came marching in like she'd summoned an army. But it was just her and her phone, held up like a badge of authority, filming everything. Her face was beet red, her breath sharp and loud, and she didn't waste a second before screaming, "This is a hostile takeover of the neighborhood!" Her voice cracked mid-sentence, but she kept going, pushing through the crowd like she was breaking up a riot. Wrestlers, still in character, stepped back and gave her a wide berth, half confused and half entertained. Karen stormed up to the taxman, jabbed a finger into his chest, and demanded identification. He grinned and pulled out a laminated card that said, "Official Slam Auditor, Wrestleverse Elite." That only made things worse. Then she turned to me, phone in hand, and said, "This is harassment. You're inciting violence. I will sue every single person on this lawn." Her voice was shrill now, rising in pitch with each word. The crowd had gone quiet, everyone watching her unravel in real time. She made the mistake of trying to slap the phone from a teenage girl who was recording. That was when someone called the police. 2 officers arrived minutes later, calm, but clearly amused by the scene. They assessed the situation, saw no violations, and politely told Karen to step away from private property. When she refused and tried to yell over them, she was gently escorted to the sidewalk, still ranting about bylaws, bylaws, bylaws. Someone clapped. Then another joined in. Soon the whole street was applauding, not mockingly, not cruelly, but in the kind of slow, ironic cheer that marks the end of a failed performance. Karen stood on the curb, stunned, holding her clipboard like a broken shield. For the first time since she started her reign, she looked small, beaten not by defiance, but by ridiculous joy she couldn't control. Word of what happened spread faster than one of Karen's memos. By Sunday morning, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Video clips from Slam Saturday were already circulating online, complete with slow-motion footage of Captain Elbow dramatically leaping over a lawn gnome while Karen screamed in the background. Some clever soul even added dramatic music and labeled it the HOA Royal Rumble. By Monday, the HOA board held an emergency meeting, not to reprimand me, but to deal with the fallout from Karen's public meltdown. Apparently, several neighbors had filed complaints, not against the wrestling, but against her. Within the week, Karen was suspended from her role as HOA president, pending conduct review. And while they framed it in gentle legalese, everyone knew what that meant. The tyrant had fallen. A new, more reasonable interim leader was appointed. Tom, the same neighbor who had spoken up for me at the hearing. Suddenly, things began to feel different, less rigid, more human. People started waving more, chatting during dog walks, even joking about who would host the next Slam Saturday. As for me, I became something of a folk hero. Kids in the neighborhood asked for wrestling stickers, and parents thanked me for reminding everyone that the HOA didn't have to mean fear. My cousin Max even got a few calls for private event gigs. Life returned to normal, but with a little more color. And Karen, she still lives 2 doors down, but now she avoids eye contact. Her clipboard hasn't been seen since. Victory didn't come with a battle, it came with laughter. And for once, the rules bent toward joy. Looking back, I never set out to start a war. I just wanted to grill burgers in peace and enjoy the little corner of the world I called home. But sometimes, peace isn't won by silence or submission. It's won by creativity, community, and a little bit of ridiculous courage. Karen thought she could control the neighborhood with fear and bylaws, but what she didn't expect was that humor could be just as powerful as confrontation. She wanted a fight, and instead, she got a festival. What started as an act of defiance became a celebration, a strange but perfect reminder that joy is contagious, and a well-timed body slam, figurative of course, can do more than any argument ever could. We didn't have to yell to be heard. We just had to be louder with kindness, laughter, and a whole lot of glitter. So if you ever find yourself staring down a clipboard-wielding tyrant who's forgotten what it means to live and let live, don't lose your cool. Call your cousin, invite a wrestling team, and throw a backyard event no one will ever forget. Sometimes the best way to win is with a suplex of style.